How did Aria T'Loak find herself on the wrong side of Cerberus? Greetings, spacefarers, I'm Mykul, and welcome to MTJ Disorder's Mass Effect Lore, a passion piece on all things Mass Effect. If you're into science fiction, gaming, and other action-adventure related media, then go ahead and subscribe and like this video for more. At long last, we finally reached the moment in this tale where Aria T'Loak shows the galaxy who she truly is, an egomaniacal manipulator who just so happens to understand the importance of society. Despite the ruthless and ambitious nature of who she is, in the end, Aria is not in favour of a universe steeped in war and destruction. In her own way, she is a purveyor of peace and harmony, just not the peace and harmony dictated by the Citadel Council.
I hate this place.
I mentioned in the previous installments of this series that Aria tends to be good for business so long as the business of others is good for her. She is absolutely a dictator in her own right, but has no interest in furthering her influence if it could end in losing what influence she already has. As a result, she is willing to participate in some level of diplomacy with the other governing bodies of the galaxy, emphasis on some. So with that in mind, it would be quite the undertaking to successfully bring her down. A powerful dictator who is perfectly content and meticulous when it comes to protecting their private kingdom, just who would be both equipped and equally as foolish to engage in a campaign to achieve this. I'll give you a hint, it rhymes with Cerberus. This is part 3 of the story of Aria T'Loak. In late 2185, Aria's relationship with Cerberus begins its initial deterioration when she becomes embroiled in the events of Mass Effect Retribution, the third installment of a series of books written by then-lead Mass Effect writer Drew Karpyshyn. The story centers on a chilling Cerberus experiment, the implementation of Reaper tech into a human subject named Paul Grayson. Grayson's history is complex and deserves its own video, but in summary, he becomes involved in Aria's story after defecting from Cerberus upon learning of their intentions for his daughter, which, in classic Cerberus fashion, are not exactly good. Through a series of sprawling circumstances, he becomes connected with several players from the extended lore, including Callie Sanders and Aria T'Loak herself. Whilst on the run from Cerberus, he finds employment with Aria and even enters into a relationship with her daughter Liselle. This would ultimately lead to Liselle's death at the hands of Cerberus agent Leng, who, after tracking down and apprehending Grayson, kills her in cold blood. It was a particularly brutal action, as it was not just to tie up loose ends, but because of Leng's xenophobia. She, along with Grayson, had been knocked unconscious, and she didn't really deserve nor need to die. The decision to do this heinous act was very tragic, but also, as time would prove, a very foolish one. True to their nature as master manipulators, Cerberus twists this encounter in such a way that even Aria uncharacteristically ends up doing their dirty work. As Aria now believes Grayson was responsible for Liselle's death, she is called upon by the Illusive man when the experiments on Grayson inevitably go awry. Meanwhile, an Alliance agent from Grissom Academy, Callie Sanders, and her partner David Anderson, who are at this point performing an investigation into the experiments, successfully track Grayson down. But unaware of the nature of these experiments, they unwittingly cause him to once again escape, but this time as an indoctrinated Reaper weapon. To contain the situation and avoid implicating Cerberus, the Illusive man exploits Aria's need for revenge, strategically leaking the location of the experiment's lab, where her people would find Sanders, Anderson, and a treasure trove of encrypted Cerberus data. Though not technically a prisoner, Aria has Sanders brought back to Omega, where she would be forced to put out a distress call catered towards luring Grayson in. Due to his connection to Sanders and the Reaper's interest in Grissom Academy, this would ultimately work, but when he arrives, Aria and her people are outmatched. Paul Grayson, for all intents and purposes at this point, is no longer there, and all that remains is a lethal Reaper-indoctrinated abomination. Upon making short work of Aria's assassins, Grayson slips away undetected, and in the confusion of the aftermath of the battle, Sanders and Anderson are also able to escape, leaving Aria alone to lick her wounds and contemplate the realities of this defeat. As we've already discussed, Aria T'Loak is an incredibly guarded individual, but for those she did love, her affection was fiercely intense, and this certainly applied to her relationship with Liselle. Though she didn't talk much about her loss, what we do know is that Aria spent a short period of time mourning her in secrecy, away from her empire on Omega. Shortly after losing track of Grayson, she returned to Thessia with Liselle's remains, presumably to lay her to rest and grieve with any family she may have had there. It isn't known exactly how long she remained on Thessia, though she would have had to return to Omega sometime before the Reaper invasion, and when she finally did, she hadn't even had time to settle back in before the consequences of her absence caught up with her. While she was gone, one of her private banks had been hit, a coordinated job carried out by the Grimskulls, a local mercenary group working alongside the Biotic Underground, a radical biotic supremacist faction. Fortunately for Aria, her networks hadn't faltered while she was gone. One of the attackers, a Grimskull merc named Shella, was captured by her agents, and desperate to save her life, Shella offered unexpected information. She claimed to know the truth behind Liselle's death. Before joining the Grimskulls, Shella had worked as a freelancer, and one of her contracts involved a Cerberus operative going by the name Manning. Shella then relayed the true events of Liselle's death as they had actually happened. As it turned out, Liselle was merely in the wrong place at the wrong time. On the night this Manning had arranged to subdue and kidnap Grayson, Paul had invited her over to his apartment. They were lovers after all, and, well, you know the rest. Aria had no reason to trust Shella. She was a thief after all, and given Grayson's past and his red sand addiction, it was just easier for Aria to believe that Liselle had simply been a victim of domestic assault. But something about Shella's story held up under scrutiny, and so, against her usual instincts, Aria let her go. Seeking to verify the story, Aria arranged a meeting with Callie Sanders and Admiral Anderson, and through them, she learned that Paul Grayson had now been eliminated, but before his death, he had transferred all of his files to Sanders' Citadel terminal. Although Aria struck a deal with them to accommodate this correspondence, her increasingly unpredictable behaviour brought on by this revelation led her to go over their heads and use her own hackers to retrieve the data directly. From that, she confirmed the identity of this Manning, none other than Kai Leng, who, as it turned out, was in fact hiding out on Omega at a human-run restaurant called the Blue Marble, and with typical Aria impulsivity, she sent the Blue Suns to eliminate him, and of course, they failed. But soon after his escape, the word was out and there was nowhere for him to run, and he was eventually captured by the Biotic Underground. Aria seizes this opportunity to exploit her partnership with the Illusive Man and offers to help recover Leng, though her real plan is to eliminate him. Working with Sanders, Anderson, and Hendor Mitra, the Grissom Academy security chief, Aria organized a strike on the Underground's base, but they arrived just minutes too late. Kai Leng had already been moved, taken to a meeting between the Underground and Cerberus, and at that meeting, Leng escaped once again. So with that, Aria T'Loak for the second time was denied the chance to take revenge for her daughter's death. You can imagine the rage that must be building up in her at this point. With the Illusive Man finding ways to remain consistently 2 steps ahead of Aria, the architecture of his manipulations at last begin fracturing. You can only deceive the Pirate Queen of Omega for so long. Despite this strain on her professional relationship with Cerberus, to maintain her hold on Omega, Aria makes what she believes to be a calculated decision. She allows Cerberus to operate within the station, and in exchange, Omega becomes a logistics hub for Cerberus's research efforts beyond the Omega-4 relay. For a time, this arrangement was stable, until one day, a Cerberus convoy docked like any other, but this one was different. Strange, aggressive creatures emerged from the ship, attacking anyone in sight. Panic spread through the station as the attackers made their way towards Afterlife, forcing Aria and her enforcers to push back directly. As the fighting escalated, a Cerberus vessel, the Cerberus, arrived to assist. In command was a man not yet familiar to many on Omega, a man who would be the catalyst for what would finally bring down the last vestiges of diplomacy between Aria and Cerberus, and give her an avenue towards some semblance of vengeance for Liselle. In the next video, we will break down the events of Mass Effect Invasion and at last move on to the final battle between Aria T'Loak and Cerberus, with a little help from a particular commander we all know and love. Thanks for watching. This was supposed to be the final part in the Aria T'Loak series, but because there is so much to detail, we're gonna go for one more. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit the bell notification icon to be informed of the next one. Keep Liselle, my friends, and until next time,
I should go.